Sun City Plumbing at 951-679-5501.
You're listening to an encore presentation of this program, KCAA, the Inland Talk Express.
Thank you for tuning in to Justice Watch Radio with attorney Zulu Ali. I am Michael Bilal Clark, along with the Justice Watch crew, Rosa Nunez, as well as Dr. Akil Bashir. This week, like every other week, we will be discussing critical topics that confront our community. We would like to also continue on where we left off from the previous weeks on inner city violence, as well as kind of broaden our topic to, just violence in general across the country, that we have been seeing a somewhat of growing epidemic of this violence going on. And one of the things that, like I said, we want to continue on is some of the inner city violence that we continue to see. And we want to focus on the book by Dr. Akil Bashir, Peace in the Hood, working with gang members to end violence. And it is a very good reading for anyone who wants to deal with some of the violence that we're confronted with in our inner city communities, as well as abroad, because I think it's universal in terms of how to deal with violence. While going through the book, I kind of reflect back on, the early years of gang violence, especially back coming up in the 80s. There was a high violent rate. There was the murder rate was, just off the chain back in the 80s. And, I'm looking at it then and then looking at it now. And, one of the questions that I wanted to pose to you coming on into this was whether or not there's been any type of change in terms of gang violence from the 80s on here. As well as, I was reading one of the chapters in a book that talked about as far as individuals being able to get out of the gangs once they're into the gang. And I don't know whether or not there's a difference in terms of culture, in terms of the Hispanic gangs and the black gangs, whether it's easier for someone to get out of the gangs, culturally, if you can understand what I mean by that. But those are the things that I wanted to raise, while reading the book. I wanted to see whether or not there has been a change in the violence from the 80s up until now, as well as individuals that might be listening and that might want to get out of the gang. Is there a way to get out,
Well, good questions, Bilal. In reference to gangs in general, I really want to be clear. The book was not written to deal with just gangs. Mm-hmm. When the book was written, we had a plethora of gang activity and people not knowing what to do. We had researchers and academicians writing thesis, etc., but no subject matter expertise on the ground. So the book was written to deal first and foremost with the onslaught of gang violence, but then to broaden itself into the larger component of comprehensive community violence. Mm-hmm. And this is what we really wanted to concentrate on while dealing with the gang violence, which so affects most marginalized communities. As I said last week, the root cause of gang violence is not individuals wanting to be in gangs. They're usually situations and circumstances that perpetuate stepping into that Pacific lifestyle. So clearly, and we can talk about how that dynamic came into fruition, my goal was to create comprehensive roadmaps and strategies to deal with all components of violence, person-to-person violence, societal violence, gang violence, municipal police violence, etc. Only dealing with gang violence, and you heard me say this 1,000 times, is just putting a Band-Aid on one component. Mm-hmm. But in terms of gang violence, to answer your secondary question, yes, there has been a major shift in gang violence from the 80s to now. Municipalities, have taken extreme measures to try to redirect. I won't say quail, I would say redirect. One of the most powerful tools that is being utilized across the nation is gentrification. And what gentrification is actually doing is going into marginalized communities and not coming in with the concept, or the original concept of what gentrification was. Originally, the concept was to restore and rebuild these communities, bring additional resources to bring them up to a level of functionality, but it's not doing that. What this gentrification is doing is actually displacing those residents that have normally been there, then creating a higher wage, a livable wage in that given area where people are going to have a higher livable wage because they raise up the property values, they raise up just the quality or the cost of living in the area, and then those people are not able to move back. What that does to the gang member is moves him or her out of that area, but what the consequence is displaces them to another area, and time again, areas that have not had gang violence end up having gang violence because of this spread.
Exactly.
Then the gang members themselves, they have gotten more professional. They're not on the ground doing what they used to do. This is what people don't understand. People that employ violence, they will mature, they will flex, they will change based on the nature of how violence is being dealt with. So they become far more professional. They've got low-level affiliation with cartels. They're much more into white-collar engagement, etc. This is very important to understand. Your last question posed was, is there a difference between black and Latino gangs? Yes, there is, a big difference, especially in California. Latino gangs basically control the prison system in California. So the Latino gangs have more of affiliation with the Narteos or either the Serranos. The breaking line is Bakerfield. So there's much more of a combined unification with the Latino gangs. They hold more to the essence of the old caste system, whereas the black gangs, the PI, Pacific Islander gangs, and other gangs, they're more loosely knitted now because they're much more economically driven. They are not unified like they once were, and they're basically spattered all over the place. But the last component, Bilal, is very important, is that the cartels have utilized a lot of the basic street gangs for their dirt work. They don't bring them into the actual family, but they'll use them for their dirt work. And the gangs, because of the ability to transport themselves through the whole country, have moved into regions and areas outside of what the comfort zone of Los Angeles used to be. You'll find them now in Seattle. You'll find them in Montgomery County, heavy, MS-13. You'll find them in Louisiana. I can go on. Places that never saw gangs before are starting to see the proliferation of gangs.
You know, another question that I wanted to ask you in terms of just reading the book, you know, there's, you know, all these different stories that I come across and I read, and for me, you know, coming from that background, I can actually, it's like one of those books that you read and you can actually visualize it happening as you go along.
Right.
You know, I mean, and one of the things, I mean, every last one of the stories almost kind of stands out to me, you know, but in your line of work, what story in this book, I mean, that you writing it, I mean, you've encountered a lot, you know, and going through all of this. What story stands out most? Because we was just going over some of the stuff that you want to read. What story stands out the most to you?
Probably all of the stories have extreme relevance, and you know, there's an old saying: a soldier knows a soldier. Somebody real knows somebody real. Somebody who is in and of the work or in and of the culture knows somebody who is in and of the culture. As you read the stories, it becomes extremely obvious that I came out of the culture. And I wear that with no shame whatsoever. In order to have expertise in a given culture, in order to really be able to engage individuals in the understanding of that culture, you have better had your hands in that culture and know what the hell you're talking about. Because anybody that picks up that book, and especially my brothers and sisters who are representing in the gang environment, the first thing they're going to say is, this dude qualified? Is he real? And so they can tell by the stories, oh yeah, he's been there and done that. Probably if I was to pick one, which is very hard to do, it would be the introduction. It would be rock. And the reason it would be rock is because rock, and the reason why the introductory chapter is so long, because it basically deals with every component of comprehensive community intervention within that story. Every aspect, peace negotiation, communication, license to operate. I can go on and on and on. It's all entailed in that introduction.
And when I was reading, I think there was a breakdown in it where I think I came across a point where it was like someone wasn't qualified to operate. And so that broke down the talk because the person wasn't qualified to make those type of decisions. And so everything, the talks broke down and you had to start all the way back over again, you know?
Yeah, and somebody almost got popped because a homie pulled out a little 4.5 and he was ready to pop some caps on some people. And it also shows, and you know, so many people who have the expertise, they run around here as if they know all the answers, et cetera, and it really perturbs me because none of us have that capability, especially dealing with the concept of violence. But what that one story, Bilal, showed my flaws also. My team was not on it. We allowed that gun to get in there. We were in a peace mediation. Should not have ever happened. So what we had to do at that point, Rosa, was go back and debrief, which came up with the concept of debriefing in all of our trainings. We debrief every situation. Was that the best thing we could have did? What do we need to do in the future, et cetera? We all could have been basically terminated up in that place because of one breach of security, which never happened again.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you know, I wanted to take this time, and I know we probably never done this on a show, but we just talked about it, whether or not Rosa can read like something from the book and maybe give, you know, and you kind of, chime in on it and give us some, some feedback on what it is that she's reading to us, you know. I mean, because I know you didn't live this, so.
Well, I think we'll start off with Rosa reading Hollow Point. And then we'll talk about it.
All right.
All right, here we go. Hollow Point got his nickname because he packed a 9mm with a 10-shot clip loaded with illegal bullets, and he didn't hesitate to use them. He was a shooter. I was breaking bread with Point one evening, and we got to talking about his life. Where are you going from here, young brother? What you gonna do when you get to my age? What about family, children, a wife? I asked him. Man, I ain't gonna never have that type of life. That ain't for me. I done put too many rifles in the ground. I know when my time come, I'm gonna be blasting. Nah, Point, you ain't got to get out like that, I said. There's ways out of life. A lot of us have done it, but it ain't easy. It doesn't come without bruises. Brother Akil, when you and your people were out there, that was a different time. All I can hope for is to be idolized, have my name remembered for standing up and not punking out for anyone or anything. In all honesty, that's the way I want it. I get everything I want out of this life. Bitches, dope, money, rep. Man, there ain't no more to life than that. Wow.
Wow. Wow, you know, wow. That story sounds typical when you run into some of the, the cast that's, that's there, that's hard, and trying to give them the feedback that there is a way out. But man, I'm gonna let you chime in because that's firsthand experience here.
Well, there was so much in that one little small story. The first thing you look at is the engagement. Okay, obviously you have to have some credibility for somebody like Hollow Point to engage you. So one of the first things I would tell people when trying to deal with the nexus of urban violence to a larger degree of violence, you've got to have credibility. The people are not going to gauge you. Hollow Point was a straight up shooter. What we know in the street, a shooter is somebody that does the dirt work terminating people. And Hollow Point was good at it. So normally he would only engage with people of that same caliber, but because of the respect I had, no arrogance meant whatsoever, in the rep I had, he engaged me because he looked to me as a mentor and an elder. Secondly, you would have to go through, okay, what does a person want? We saw from the story, Hollow Point was, he was living his life. So his normality was exactly what he was doing, and his fame, his claim to fame was to go out in a blaze of glory.
Exactly.
So now I have to say, okay, if I'm gonna try to change this little brother's thinking process, what am I gonna offer him that's going to give him the same type of reward that he's getting out of this life?
Yeah.
So it's not just going in, talk, Brother Hollow Point, just put down the gun, stop the killing. And you know, Brother Akil, what are you talking about? And then the third thing was the fact that, okay, Hollow Point is basically saying, Akio, you were out there, it was a different time. My generation is living with another mode of thinking. So either Hollow Point did not know that I had been continuously on the street, or he feels that I'm disassociated with his thinking process. So now I've got to breach that. I've got to show him that I do know what he's going through. I do know what his thinking process is, and I can assist in that process, okay? Lastly, you can see just from the engagement, this is going to be a long-term engagement.
Yeah.
This is not going to be no 1 or 2 or 3 sit down with Hollow Point, and then we're going to have him going another path.
Yeah.
I might not even convince him to turn, but if I can't convince him to turn, what are my options? Can I reduce him doing damage to the neighborhood, to the community? Is it something I can provide to the table to where he will not be as explosive as he would be if there was no boundaries put in place?
Yeah.
So now all of this is strategy that you've got to think out, plan, etc. And there's going to be some hits and misses in that process. The one thing we would like to do is try to redirect him before he does any more major damage, and I don't know if that's a possibility.
Yeah. And one of the things I think he said in that was that, you know, there's no way for him out because he laid down too many people. It's too many people looking for him. It's too many people that, you know, he got that bullseye on him. And I think that one of the things that when people do find that out, you know, they have to totally and completely get away from where they was, you know, where they was born, where they was raised, and just totally just, you know, what do you call it? Relocate somewhere kind of far. But you know, with individuals coming up in the hood, you know, that's all they know.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, that's an excellent point you bring up, Brother Bilal, because, you know, are the options that we might provide, are they doable? You know, to move somebody out of a venue, put them in another geographical area, and then keep some resiliency around them where they have some type of buffer where they can't be found out, brother, that's monumental. It takes money, it takes effort, and normally you're not going to be infused with those type of capabilities, so you look at the next option. You got to have more than one option going in, and at the same time, you've got to engage. Because if Hollow Point has this target, as you so well said, on his back, which he does, okay, your involvement with Hollow Point might put that same target on your back.
Yeah.
So see, you know, some of these people going into the heart of the belly of this beast thinking that just because they come from a university or come from an organization that knows the neighborhood to a certain degree, you don't really understand the depth of what you have to deal with when you are engaging this devil. And you can't be afraid going in. I want to emphasize that because as you choose to engage, you've got to know the consequences that you might have to face in terms of trying to create some element of peace and safety in these neighborhoods. We've had many individuals inclusive in this struggle that lost their lives. I've almost lost my life on quite a few occasions, and the book echoes those points. But your passion, your drive, and your willingness to give some back to the social context of this society has to be driving you to tell you that you've got to move forward with this process. Hell, at the end of the day, we all gonna die anyway.
Yeah, exactly. You know, in my growing up, because I come from that environment, you know, like Hollow Point, you know, you take that name, you automatically know he's about business, you know. Whenever you hear certain names or individuals, I remember when I was growing up, they dubbed me El Loco. And so because they dubbed me El Loco, I had to be on the forefronts of the line. I couldn't be on the back end of everything because that name, I had to live up to that name. If I didn't live up that name, it'd get stripped from me real quick. Like you say, you have to have that license to operate. People have to be able to, you have to be able to represent, you know, and live up to that name. And I think that whenever you encounter, and it wasn't easy for me to make that transition, but when I came into that consciousness that I had to do this, you know, even when I see people walk up to me years later, you know, and they call me that name, I automatically know. They don't know about my transformation. They don't know about what I'm doing now in my life. Some people, it's very difficult for them to you know, get away from that. But, you know, I come up where individuals, well, we did have individuals that did make that effort to try to, like you and myself, trying to make that effort and pull these young brothers and sisters up out of this environment. Back in the days, they didn't have one of you or me to try to make that effort.
Right.
Well, and one of the things I want to do was, but I'll let Rosa read it because I want to come to a point where we understand. I want you to explain the program that you do now, along with individuals, and you can't be replicated. But we have this so much violence around to where you got these businesses that franchise, but at some point we need to franchise this because you can't be in one place at every time. You know what I'm saying?
Well said. Look, I want to go back, and like I said when we first talked about the book a couple of shows ago, there are certain things I had to put in the book that I would have never put in the book because I was taking them to my grave, not because I was ashamed of them or anything of that nature. It was just too personal. But if I was going to write a guide, a roadmap, people had to be able to be psychologically, physically, and emotionally moved when they read what was in there. So I had to put those things in there, some of those things which were part of my trauma. And one of the things that the book did for me was help me deal with a whole lot of my trauma. Since it's in the book, I will say it, but I would have never told people this. Back in the day, I was an enforcer, straight up. I was known. Everybody knew my discipline. They knew if you came across Brother Akil, you better be ready to deal because he is going to enforce whatever the code, rule, or was that was prevalent at that time, and I did that well. And even as I went into the social organizations, I carried that banner with me through the party, through the nation. I was an enforcer across the board. And so being that, it allowed me to acquire a whole nother level of respect and appreciation for the younger soldiers on the street because they know I was about no bull, okay? They knew business was to be had. So if you came across Akil, you better be on point, bam. And with that being said, I had a higher level of discipline. I had a higher level of structure and operation. And a lot of the younger soldiers adhered to that because they were looking for that generalship. So I was able to turn that into some very constructive components in dealing with them because I didn't have to go after so many of them because they came after me. Remember, I had one of the first black martial arts fighting centers in the city back in '72. I had my first martial arts school on, actually it was my third martial arts school on 52nd and Broadway. So a lot of the individuals from the different sets were there. We had the Malcolm X Center down the street. We had the First Orthodox Mosque, Zayd's on Vernon at the time. We had Temple 56 down on Broadway. So I was in the middle of a hub.
Exactly.
And so in the book, it'll talk about my reputation and staying on the streets and how I was able to be effective. It was because of that. Now, what I had to do with that is I had to turn that, if I was going to build something, into something structurally that wasn't personally driven by me. What I mean by that is time and time again, the individual have that connect with the people. He's able to turn, she's able to redirect, but at the end of the day, if that's all it is, what happens when that individual is removed from the process, dies, or decides to go a different way? Getting to the second part of your question, Brother Bilal, that's where we had to start professionalizing and creating systems. We had to start building strategies that were going to be able to transpose ourselves. So what we had to do now is say, okay, what are we being effective and how are we being effective? Okay, we understand credibility, we understand personality. So if somebody was to step in and try to do the same degree of work, what would be the essential tools that they would need to be effective? Maybe not having the same level of credibility that I had, but what could be brought to the table that they can supersede what I built? And that's where the process of creating system-driven practices and protocols became so essential. So that's why we developed the Training Institute, and a lot of that came from my engagement in the martial arts where we learned strategies and structures, but the book end result was to create a whole complexity of situations and then build out how you would deal with those situations with a process. You notice after each chapter, what we read on Pigtail. Rosa's going to read Pigtail, I know.
Yeah.
Each of these things represent the actual story which gave you the feat or the situation. Now we went in reverse and say, okay, if this situation was to happen again, what would be the steps that would be needed to take to redirect Hollow Point, Pigtail, Lou in a different direction?
Got you.
That was the concept.
Oh, okay. Got you.
Wow.
Okay, on that, Rosa, let's
Well, here we have the story of Pigtail. So it says, Pigtail got her name from her hairstyle. She combed her hair into 2 balls on the side of her head, kind of like Mickey Mouse ears. She was a small 15-year-old who made up for her lack of height with a firecracker personality. Responding to people with aggression and violence. I had grown up with her father, Slim. We'd gone through some hell in the streets together. Slim called me one day to ask me to enroll Pigtail in my karate school to straighten her out because she was getting in deep with a girl gang. I'm afraid if I don't step in, she's going to end up locked up or dead, or I'm going to end up eliminating some people, he said. When I saw Pigtail arrive at class with Slim, she was hanging out of her car talking smack to people walking by, her usual self. I knew I'd have to have a sit down with her because I didn't tolerate bullshit in my martial arts academy. After class, I asked her why she'd joined the gang, especially as she came from a solid family. She said the gang gave her protection from girls at school who were always picking on her and beating her down. She said it happened so many times she developed that aggressiveness as a defense. But even that did not stop the torment. It only stopped when a group of female gang members befriended her. Once she was accepted into the set, which liked her fiery temper and could use it for its own purposes, the bullying stopped immediately. No one else had ever stuck up for her. Her pops tried, but he never really understood how severe the bullying was and thought it was normal kid stuff. Because the gang stood up for her, she said she'd be loyal to the homegirls, always. Pigtail made real progress as she studied martial arts with me for 2 years. She became an astounding student as a savage street fighter. She also learned how to control her temper most of the time, but she never was able to break away from her homegirls. Her body was found one night in an abandoned house. She had been beaten, strangled, raped repeatedly, and left on a pile of trash. I had grown to love Pigtail like she was my own, and her death affected me profoundly. Her parents never recovered from the loss of their daughter. They divorced, and her mother later committed suicide. Pigtail's killers were never caught.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did not, I get, evidently I didn't get to that. I think I can, wow.
It honestly, for me, like, I feel like I've mentioned it before, but like all these stories really humanize those people, people in gangs. Because for me, growing up in gang infested community and still living there, I have this trauma of, like, when I was an 8-year-old girl, I told you, like, the bullets pierced through our garage door. Yep. And I would see my dad kind of come home, and work 24/7. And I would kind of think to myself, like, why us? We're trying our hardest to survive and get out of communities like this. But at the same time, it's like now reading this and now living in San Bernardino, even still gang-infested communities, I can humanize these individuals who are in gangs and know that they're just like me. They're trying to survive. They're trying to get out of this lifestyle, or there's some trauma that they have that they find that healing in gang life.
Exactly, and it goes back to just Pigtail's story when you see where she was saying that the father didn't understand me.
Yeah.
And so that made her more acceptance of the gang, and the gang embraced her, and they were able to utilize her. But I think that's the story that we hear. The story that we hear is that these young people growing up, and the thing about it is, moms and pops, or just moms, whatever it is, just at home, constantly working day in and day out, paying no attention and wherever they can get that attention from. Yeah, exactly. And survival. And there's nothing wrong with trying to survive. They have to work in order to provide. But the thing about it is, we lack on the other end of it being able to sit down and communicate with our youth. But if we can't communicate with them, most definitely somebody will communicate with them.
Yeah.
Well, excellent point from both of you, Rosa and Bilal. Look, that's what happens in marginalized communities. Because of the lack of economic regeneration, families, in some cases, mothers, fathers, have to work 2-3 jobs. What about the mother that doesn't have the father at the house because he's either in the penal industrial complex or he's dead. So now she has to be out there just to make basic ends meet for them children. Okay, she knows she wants to be there with them, but she can't. Now, one of the things that that story should have jumped right out, and what it jumps out to most people when they go a little bit deeper, is the fact that I failed. See, the father had brought Pigtail to me because he couldn't handle her, which was an excellent move. Now, I assumed that I could take her and if I put her into school, if I get her around the right female soldierettes and male soldierettes with my structure, et cetera, that we could train her. Now, we did. We did to a certain degree, but what we didn't realize was, yes, we put the external discipline in place. Her actions and behaviors changed. She became a savage fighter. She was able to control her temper. But the one thing that she was affiliated with the gangs for was the inclusion that they gave her when they took up for her. Even when she changed her whole life around, what did the drawback to the female sisters was the fact that they included her in the process, gave her hope, and made her feel good. I missed that.
So it was loyalty.
It was loyalty, but it was loyalty based on the fact that they gave her wholeness. And regardless, now most people would say, well, those were gang members, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, but her normality were those gang members. They were the only ones that assisted her to get some level of greatness in her, for her to feel hope, etc. And me coming out of the culture, I missed that because the externals was, I saw her discipline go up, she was structured, she was doing good. And so coming back full circle, what I had to do now is look at that whole situation and say, wow, where did I drop the ball? But the other thing that the story tells you is what? Not only did Pigtail lose her life, her mother committed suicide and her father went astray. So the whole family was destroyed in the process because we couldn't get to the root cause of what was causing the violence in the first place. It wasn't her being in the gang. It was the fact that it was a lack of inclusion. She was bullied in the process. She didn't feel hope. Her father was not able to get to her, so she didn't have an external reach out. There were so many components that were missed that had to be brought to the table.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I think we have a caller.
Yes,
Hey.
I called in because I just see you guys talking about Hollow Point and Pigtail. I knew a lot of Hollow Point. Knew a lot of Pigtail. Once my father was killed March 25th, 1972. So we didn't call ourselves gangs. We called ourselves factions. We controlled a lot of drug trafficking. And as far as the hitters, see, once you get involved, like I got in the game in 75, so it was a full-scale war going on. Just like some people who went to Vietnam or Korea, I'm in the war on the streets. And it's not, and your mentality really changes. Like, I really haven't been out of the game since January 15, 2012. It's a conscious decision. Like even see the street documentation is so strong. It's stronger than drugs. It ain't like but when you really a knock around person, you really kind of enjoy it. Only thing, I went to 4 funerals in 1 week, and they didn't get killed at the same time. And it wasn't people I seen walking up and down the street. These are people who I'm out here getting it up with. So your mind, you always on defense. I mean, you you wanna when you go out to a restaurant, you pick the seat you sit in.
Yeah.
I mean, you really you take 1-2 steps. I mean, you looking behind your back. You can call it paranoid. But it's like if you want to stay alive out here, and it's like you have to make a conscious decision. My attorney, I beat a federal case. My attorney said, if you got somewhere to go, because everybody's gonna be dead. he was trying to, and you know, he put it to me in a way. You know, I said, "What you trying to say?" He told me they took a vote. Cause see, when I called a federal case, see, a lot of people they look at when they ain't in the game, they don't really know. When you really in it, you know, you catch a fair case, you know where the bodies is buried. So people look at you like, "Hey, will he flip?"
Mm-hmm.
Your life is in danger, partner. You might think, "Oh, these guys love you and everything." Okay, they'll blow your brains out. They take a vote. They think you weaker than you think you strong. You going, and it be your friends. I knew guys out here that would kill you and help your mother bury you. Help your mother bury you.
Normality. Mm-hmm.
You know, so when we got to give them the flip side. I have a hard time getting in places, talking to people, but it don't deter me because I know I have something to say. But I listen to you guys and it's like I know so many hollow points. A lot of them got 5 life sentences, you know, or was put to death. But and I know some girls, fine, beautiful. You have to watch them before, because they'll smoke you quicker than hollow point.
Yes, they will.
You know. So anyway, you know, I know you guys are doing a great job. Y'all, you guys, and the main thing, you guys really trying.
Yes, sir.
But, you know, we got to get more people that really want to try, you know, to turn it around because, see, I'm not really mad at these white people out here taking care of their own. We the ones got to, if we going to solve our problem, we got to do it ourselves. Ain't nobody coming out of the sky. You know, they put it on the church and all that. The churches ain't doing nothing for the community. You know, which they should be. Yeah. They getting the money, but they ain't doing what they should do. We the only ones that can get our own self out of this hole.
The only ones that are going to save us from us is us.
Exactly.
That's right, 100%.
You know,
I appreciate you guys taking my call. I know you guys y'all really trying to turn this thing around. We just need more of you guys.
And we need brothers like you too. And appreciate your voice. There's a big difference between elders and olders. Elders is out here trying to put it in. You mentioned a minute ago that we need to reach out and do, and there needs to be more. That's why one of the reasons why Brother Ali put this show together, which we salute him for, to try to get that voice out there, to try to get more on board. We need more people, you know, who are committed to that. We're going to have Rosa read one more story, and then we're going to transpose this into a larger community violence.
Yeah. And we have Zulu Ali on the other line.
Who?
Attorney Zulu Ali.
Brother Ali.
Good morning, Justice Watch crew.
Good morning.
We missed you, brother.
Good morning.
We missed you, brother.
Yeah, it's about almost 2:00 in the morning here, man. Here
Oh my gosh.
Yes, sir.
in the Netherlands, and as you guys know, I'm been admitted to the International Criminal Court, so we're trying to get some things established over here, and so. You know, been a little bit busy trying to enjoy myself a little bit, but I did get an opportunity to hear it, and you guys are definitely holding it down today.
Just a reflection of yourself.
Exactly. That's all.
Yeah, and it's an outstanding discussion, and obviously I'm really excited about the fact that we're digging deeper into your book, because your book itself could be a show because it's so informative, and it gives a lot of information.
Yeah.
You know, both to individuals who are involved, as well as obviously a lot of individuals who really don't understand the culture and actually what individuals are going through. Mm-hmm. And to hear yourself and Bilal talk about the reality of really what's going on inside of the culture. Mm-hmm. I mean, is really powerful, and it's enlightening, and I think it's the type of education that we actually need, because it really goes to the point that we're really living in two different and maybe three different Americas as far as really what's going on as far as individuals' reality and what they have to deal with, on these streets. Mm-hmm. And the fact that, unfortunately, it takes individuals like yourself and Bilal, who are actually on the street working with these individuals, to really get out here and actually deal with, the crisis and kind of understanding really what's going on, because clearly, unfortunately, and we spoke about this before, that we should not have to deal with it like it's a problem within our community. It should be a problem that actually could be dealt with, and from a broader perspective, but we're left out here trying to do these things, on our own. I think that if we had seen this as an American problem, then obviously America could obviously get involved and actually, try to do something about it. However, we do know that there's been a history from the very beginning of concerted efforts to make sure that individuals who are in these particular communities and in these conditions, that that they can't get out of them. I mean, a lot of it is construct. In other words, there is no, I think that a lot of times our communities are often compared to other communities that have been able to be, successful. However, in comparison, which is unfair, because in comparison to the Native American community and other indigenous communities and the African American community, we haven't, there's always been a government effort to make sure that we are put in these conditions. And unfortunately, our young men, are having very, I think reading the history and understanding when you have a government that has made sure, to concerted efforts to put drugs in the community, concerted efforts to try to destroy black men and black women, or destroy empowerment altogether by, and there is an ongoing effort to make sure that those individuals who have been very instrumental in contributing to our community, they have actually been, targets, and there's a long legacy of people who have went into the communities and tried to make these differences. And when they go into the community and try to make these differences, there's an effort to make sure. I want also, I think maybe next week we might touch on it, and I want kind of, Rosa, when you get an opportunity, I want you to look at this thing I was reading about actually while I was here, that I had an opportunity to speak to someone that talked about this issue called the race paper. I don't know if anybody's ever heard about that, but that's actually something with the Department of Homeland Security and the other federal agencies who have actually been targeting some of the more recent, movements and activists, and basically there's a lot of the papers and surveillance that have been conducted where they've been following individuals who have been going across the country involved in some of the activism and some of the marching. These individuals have actually been surveillanced by the federal government, and it seems that this effort has been, kind of, is very similar to the COINTELPRO operation, and been targeting, African American activists. So we get it from all points. We've got them putting poison in the communities, and then on the same, breath, when we have individuals who are actually in the communities trying to make sure that they're doing things to make things right within the community, oftentimes they become, targets. So they try to go out of their way to make sure that, and sometimes that's why we end up with so many watered down leaders, because they aren't, there's a lot of leaders who are out there, unfortunately, who are only able to operate based upon the fact that they are subjected to a lot of compromise. And the compromise oftentimes, undermines the overall objective of the organization and the overall objective of kind of trying to make the community become more progressive and do the things that we're doing. But, I think that it's, as you always say, Doc, I mean, it's not a moment, it's a movement. So it's an ongoing struggle. And, it is, something that I think that, as we're going on, and we're oftentimes, I think a few weeks ago, we were talking about how we were going to see the increase in, some of the, shootings in places. You know, of course, we've seen recently the synagogue shooting. We've seen these people sending out pipe bombs and doing all these crazy things and creating this entire culture, you know, of hate that has actually increased. And when you clearly have someone in 2018, we've elected a leader and have a country that basically is allowing him to go and create this type of environment and the type of things and the type of things that you're seeing that you would not expect to see at this point in our lifetime. We thought we were progressing, and he's taken us back decades.
Exactly.
You know, as far as the way that he's dealing with things, and you know, it's terrible. But you know, unfortunately, sometimes things happen for a reason, and we know that basically, you know, it's been exposed, so we know what we're dealing with.
Yeah.
But again, I mean, I'm not going to hold you guys, and I'm going to let you guys get back to your conversation because I'm actually enjoying it, even though it's really early. And my time clock is still with you, so I can't really go to sleep after listening to what I've been listening
Excuse me,
to.
Brother Zulu.
Good words, Ali.
Hey.
Excuse me.
So what's up, brother?
Excuse me. Let me tell you something. The race papers, they've been around for a while. They've been around for a while. They got formed like with the hip hop police. What they doing? They honestly hire guys in the hood they working for like the FBI, and what they're doing, they know everything that you, just like Brother Zulu's stop and frisk. I wouldn't be surprised if they surveilling him because they've been around. It's been over 15 years they've been doing that. Whenever they started the hip hop cops, they started them.
But see,
You know how they had Fred Hampton? They had Fred Hampton, the head of his security, working for him, letting him know exactly where he was sleeping. They doing that right now. They started it about 15 years ago. On the streets, race papers, especially in Missouri, they know about it. They know about it.
But revolutions areas don't let fear stop them people. If we're going to change the nexus of where our communities are at, generals are just that, generals, and we are made under pressure. So that's why we have to continue take note of what's being done. Those of us that have been through COINTEL, those of us that have been through the movement, those of us that had to face the fire of what we see reoccurring now, it's incumbent upon us to bring the strategies to navigate around that because it's not going to stop. If it works, we have to move forward with it. So, you know, good words on your part, Ali, and our caller. And we're going to try to wrap this up and give some solutions and bring it into full day today and the violence that we see today. It ain't just no gang violence out there.
Exactly.
So we're going to try to bring it full circle. Yes.
Yeah. And you know, just going back to in terms of like the violence that Zulu was just speaking in regards to, you know, we're going to continue to see this violence escalate because we have a cat that's in office right now that's perpetuating this violence, that's putting it out like that. And so that's why we see the synagogue shooting this week. And then we saw the one at the Kroger store where the guy went into the church prior to coming to Kroger's. Well, it was all race related, you know?
But what is the missing link in all of that, Brother Bilal? And I'm glad Zulu brought up the points about the leadership, et cetera. You have to give the people response capability. See, you cannot wait for a suppression or a suppressive movement to come in and do diligence for you. Our people are not getting the skills and the tools and the capabilities to go out and engage, and that's what I want to talk about before we get off this thing. You cannot, in this environment today, sit back and not propel yourself to engage some form of violence somewhere in your lifetime. It is going to happen.
Exactly.
And our communities are not getting the tools and skills, and that's what we've got to do. So Rosa's going to read one more story, and then we'll talk our way out of here.
Yeah, and here we have the story of Julie. It says, I had known Julie for many years. In her younger days, she had skated on the edge of gang life, largely through a boyfriend who was in it. But as she matured, she left all that behind, got married to another guy, and was focused on raising their 2 small children. Then that old boyfriend resurfaced. He had never accepted the fact that Julie had left him. He used to say that she belonged to him and would always. After going along with that for years, Julie finally packed up and left. She didn't see him again until he re-entered her life with a vengeance. In a fit of jealousy-driven revenge, he murdered her husband and 6-year-old daughter, strangling them as well as torturing her husband. Julie had seen the horrific display of their bodies in their home before she called me, sobbing. I stayed with her for hours at the scene, later taking her for coffee so she could collect her thoughts. She often stared blankly as we talked and made a plan for her to stay with her sister. Following interventionist protocol to assist victims, I kept her company until the sister arrived and promised to follow up with her the next day, confident that she seemed as stable as she could be under the circumstances. One of the toughest parts of the interventionist job is seeing the victim's family at the most painful point of loss, usually either at the crime scene or at the hospital. This is where they may first learn of their loved one's premature death, bear the full frontal assault of being a bullet-torn body, or witness their relative's last breath. Sometimes it may not be a death, but a catastrophic injury that can leave family members struggling to grapple with the prospect of giving lifetime care. The expression of anguish and agony can be overwhelming. In my opinion, this is what takes an emotional toll on the interventionist more than the actual violence.
Now, if you went through the end of that story, what Julie ended up doing was killing herself and the last daughter that she had. And we thought we had got through to her at the table. Her silence was basically a shut-off, and she put up roadblocks that I was through. And we didn't read that. I didn't read that. And so she did end up, we lost her. And that's the healing part. And it would be, I would be remiss if I didn't go into some quick strategies, and that's really what I wanted to get through. You know, if we're going to deal with the violence, first and foremost, we have to have what's called primary prevention, which means out front. This is where we have to have strategies for the entire community to be safe and to strive. The objective in being out front is to stop violence before it occurs. That's comprehensive prevention. That's unfortunately where most municipalities stop. Then once we do that, we have to move over to principal intervention. And what principal intervention is basically where we are in the moment. Once everything is going on, we've got to get in there, intervene, and try to navigate. It supersedes, it surpasses prevention, because prevention, for whatever reason, didn't work, or we stepped into that violent situation while it was ongoing. The objective is to intervene at the first sign of risk, counter effectively when violence occurs. Lastly, if we were able to do that, we come to our last point, which is tertiary engagement, which basically means recovery. Julie needed a state of recovery, and it was certain components that should have been brought to the table, but we didn't have the time. She took her life, and she had gave up too quickly. The objective is to repair and restore. We got to repair and restore our youth, our families, and communities affected by the violence, whether it's gang violence, person-to-person violence, etc. So out front, in the moment, and recovery. That is our overall larger strategy. Then we got to get more specific. We got to come in there and say, well, okay, what are the tools we've got to have? We've got to be able to engage, like I mentioned last week. Engaging means we've got to be able to deal on all levels, whether that violence is family related, community related, etc. We've got to be able to make an assessment, go in there and say, this is causing that. We're going to have to deal with that as well as the individual. Once we engage, we've got to be able to respond. We either got to have crisis response unit. These are practitioners who understand what the hell they're looking at, how to go in. If something happens, critical debriefing teams, people that have the skills to go in there and not only stop, but re-heal and create that healing process, as well as some short and long-term strategies. Then we go into operate. We got to be able to operate at every function. We got to bring equitable services in. Once we establish that stability, what are these people going to need to create some type of stableness, both in the short and long term? And you heard me mention that, both of you, many times. Then we have to collaborate. We've got to bring everybody to the table that can get those equitable services in to repair our community and make it heal. Two more, and lastly, we've got to build bridges. We've got to start building the componentry to where we can take these individuals who are traumatized, who are in a state of crisis, and put them in different environments, as you mentioned earlier, Bilal, where we can get them out of that NICS. So we got a whole wraparound strategy there.
Exactly. Besides what you have, besides the organization that you have right now, do you know of any other organizations that actually do what you do?
Oh, yeah, we collaborate across the nation.
Oh,
You know,
okay.
we train, that's one of the reasons why we have a training center, but everywhere we go to train, because we're practitioners, we on the ground, we create that safety net, that holistic safety net that I talked about last week, to where we've got these, not only cities working with each other, but these different groups. We got out here, the Reverence Project, Brother Achilles Sherrills. We got in Montgomery County, Luis Cardona in the Sun program. So we building, I can go on and on and on, but for the sake of time, everywhere we go, we build a larger safety net, and we all working together. And this is ground level practitioners who come out of the work, who understand violence well.
Okay.
We work with universities too, USC, UCLA, Chicago School, the Alliance International, et cetera.
Okay. Okay. So I mean, this been a very enlightening show, you know, especially going through your book and being able to see some of the stories, you know, and you being able to kind of, you know, walk us through all the stories that actually been read, you know. It's been an eye-opening experience or eye-awakening for me just to, you know, hear you speak about that. But
The book is on at Barnes & Noble and Amazon. Yeah.
okay. So thank you for tuning in to Justice Watch Radio with attorney Zulu Ali. I'm Michael Bilal Clark, along with the Justice Watch crew, Rosa Nunez, Dr. Akil Bashir. We'll see you next week, same time, same place. Until next week, stay blessed.
You're on board KCAA's Inland Talk Express. KCAA.